This is the world's first internet connection. A simple combination of the letters O and L between Stanford University and UCLA. Running on a telephone line, the amount of information that was first transmittable was around 50 kilobits per second. The amount of information to fill up a text document, download an audio file, or load a web page. An innovation intended to assist the Cold War efforts between NATO and the Warsaw Pact, with the United States and Russia leading a proxy war. A development that fermented off the backs of World War II. A global conflict over current ruler of Germany, Adolf Hitler, who led a massive campaign to conquer the world and establish German Aryan dominance, starting off with the invasion of Poland. And a ramping up of the production of nuclear weapons to assure the other party does not use theirs in fear of retaliation would be the means of competing. A practice known as mutually assured destruction. In this ever-changing, rapidly paced world, the US Department of Defense, aka the Pentagon, invested in a vision. A vision of a technology that makes the potential to make information between governing bodies practically instant, and reduce the barrier of entry to access the minds of experts to that of a click of a mouse. This vision, formed by Joseph Cal Robman, an American MIT professor of computer science who had the idea, named the Intergalactic Computer Network, a name that was scrapped for the more aptly named Advanced Research Project Agency Network, or ARPANET for short. A project that has since defined a generation, expanding from a room of servers that could barely forward an email to what we have today. A global web that makes the collective knowledge of humanity accessible to all, while being over 5,000 times faster than the pitiful 50 kilobits per second started off with. But with such a groundbreaking technology comes with it the potential for taboos, misuses, and its fair share of abuses. The commonality depending on where you're located. Let me explain why a free and open internet is a hoax. Starting off with the world's most populous country, China is a terrifying example of 1984 coming to life, as the wider society has a political system with a strong Marxist-Leninist bent to it, being controlled by a centralized ruling party called the Chinese Communist Party, or the CCP, with Xi Jinping as their leader. Through their governance, they control the direction that Chinese society will go, having a direct say in what any other governing body has the authority to do, promising peace, unity, and prosperity to the society they rule over. A promise that is not without its merits, as poverty rates have been in a steep decline since they instated themselves as the rulers of the territory, with the last major event that threatened the unity of the country being the Chinese Civil War of 1949, an event that has been seen over the 4,000 years of the region's history, as the territory has been broken apart and put together many times over, making Chinese culture sort of like one of those quilts that your grandma knits you for Christmas, a culture that is deeply respectful of hierarchy, with Taoist and Buddhist religious leanings, a militarized police force of over 2 million participants, and a geography so diverse that it had to be separated into 5 regions to manage it properly, making the region a challenge for any governing body. But our friends the CCP have a power, the likes of which conquerors, emperors, and politicians of yesteryear could not even fathom of. That little something being called the Great Firewall of China. A set of internet regulations that is key to maintaining control and stamping out dissidents. Anything unpatriotic, bad, news that goes against the official narrative, removed off the face of the earth. Foreign social media platforms supporting the liberal agenda suddenly discontinued. With these rules being enforced in the most high-stakes circumstances, such as the Tiananmen Square protests of 1989, an event where 70,000 students marched through the streets of China's capital city, demanding a more liberalized economy, ending in open fire upon the crowd, and a mass campaign by the state to cover up the event, through scrubbing the internet on all posts on the matter, the use of bots to flood forums that make comments on these events, and the occasional arrest of those who spread the information, especially pesky, impotent journalists. All this culminating in a nearly yearly event, in which unpatriotic troublemakers pushed the issue every April in disapproval of what happened during the original protests. A day called Internet Maintenance Day by detractors, sprouting legendary memes of ducks being halted by the might of a single protester as a means to get around censors by replacing machines of war with inconspicuous bath time items. These tactics are applied to many other controversial events that has the potential to make the Chinese citizen question the authority of the CCP. If that were to be COVID lockdown criticisms, concentration camps of the Uyghur Muslim minority group, or memes of Disney characters that look suspiciously like the leader. When it comes to maintaining the perception of the party's prestige and competence, no stone is left unturned. Given how pervasive this monitoring is, you may be asking yourself, is there any way around this curated view the average Chinese citizen find themselves in? Well, taking a look into the logistics of how China is run makes the prospects for a freer and open internet a bleak one. As currently, China has an internet police force that numbers around 2 million public opinion analysts that work directly with the propaganda arm of the CCP, the State Council Information Office, an institution that plants agents in corporations, small and large, over the territory they govern. Ideas such as anonymity on the internet has been effectively criminalized through the outlawing of non-government approved VPNs and encryption software. And as if that wasn't enough, they could always rely on the world's most centralized internet provider system, a system mandated to collect and store data locally through 4 state-owned corporations that have direct access to 95% of the population's internet traffic. A power so strong that there are documented cases of internet blackout zones for upwards of 10 months in a bid to curb violence in regions of distress. An effort that had an effect on over 16 million people, all at the flick of the switch. They then take all the information they gather and store it into a database called the Golden Shield Project for use in the future. If that were to be a conviction based off of one's search history, or the creation of digital profiles of citizens through facial recognition AI and video monitoring, making it easily one of the best examples of how a tool like the internet, something that was supposed to empower people through streamlining communication, could be wielded by others in order to oppress opposition. Taking a step down from what could be seen as the pinnacle of using the internet as a tool for social control, Russia is next up on the topping block. A state that boasts to be the largest in the world by size. So large, in fact, that it spans over 11 different time zones, 27 different official languages, and a multitude of geographies across its topography. A region that has a history of communistic sympathies, as the society has only been a federal republic since the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991. A party structure quite similar to that of China, a one-party state with a chairman, Mikhail Gorbachev, who is the head of the operation and works with a small inner circle, with supreme authority over the direction of the empire. An empire that eventually collapsed because of its inability to meet the economic needs of the population through its bureaucratic apparatus, causing political instability and eventually reform, resulting in a new social order, one that is non-committal to democratic values, or term limits, or foreign national sovereignty, headed by the third-term president, Vladimir Putin. To come back from such a socio-economically turbulent event, the man has ripped a page out of the great book of Chinese internet censorship, establishing an agency tasked with the supervision of telecommunications, the Roskomnadzor, who manages a giant blacklist of sites deemed unfit for consumption for the public, called the Single Register, that much like the Great Chinese Firewall, curates the flow of information on the internet to something that's more favorable towards the party's interests, making the examples of the blatant misuse of this power nearly as plentiful as their Chinese counterpart. Because, just like its bordering nation, Russia conducts mass surveillance on its citizens through its state-owned internet service provider. Rostelecom bans VPNs from public use, promotes anti-liberal propaganda, and Western platforms such as Snapchat, Telegram and WhatsApps are delisted, citing the potential for it to be used by terrorists as justification for their actions. But their grip on the internet goes even further, as they are required to verify the identity of the people via their phone numbers, and regulations of any site with a daily user count more than 3,000 is stored within servers within the country by mandate, with reports of this list expanding exponentially in order to combat misinformation against the current war in Ukraine. An increase of 140,000 websites since 2014, with no end in sight, and a further crackdown on media figures, wiki editors, and newscasters who stand in their way. A power that was used to silence political opposition during the 2021 Russian presidential election. A bit that was stifled through the removal of voting websites, Telegram chatbots, YouTube channels, Google Documents of the challenger, and a further blocking of the man's name on nearly half of all Russian networks. Actions that were pervasive enough in their scope to cause issues in Google's app engine, eventually having knock-on effects with their own central banking system through the repeated throttling of the IP, ending in the imprisonment of Alexei for 8 years, as it was the only means to keep the man from pursuing the rights to the keys to the kingdom. An act that shows how important the flow of information is in the pursuit of expanding one's power and influence. So far, we covered some of the worst examples of internet policing, so let's take a step back. Let's cover a state that is not mostly tyrannical. Maybe one with separations of power, individual rights, and equal applications of the law, and protections for unpopular speech. Let's talk about America, the birthplace of the internet. The American Union has been relatively stable since its last civil war in 1865. Sporting 2 natural water barriers at its coast, friendly, weaker nation above and below, and a land that supports the world's largest economy and military. A state acquired after westward expansion for its original 13 colonies to a current 50-state nation, all at the cost of a couple of territorial battles with native tribes and the state of Mexico. A success due in part to its founding documents, boasting a constitution that is the longest active constitution in the world, containing 10 rights of citizens at the very start of the document, rights that are inalienable and intended to limit the powers of any governing body in the land, with articles such as the First Amendment, an amendment that allows for free speech, extending in its application to that of online interaction. So, such a nation must be the polar opposite of what you would find inside of a Chinese dictatorship or the oligarchy of the Russian Federation. A truly free and open web where the truth of an issue can be spoken because of a lack of oversight on the internet, logistically speaking. The reality of the state of American internet is much more complex than someone may first assume. Though the operation of the internet is fairly decentralized and has some protections against state action, the country still contains within elements of the aforementioned autocratic nation.
The search is underway for those who are behind these evil acts. I've directed the full resources of our intelligence and law enforcement communities to find those responsible and to bring them to justice. We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them.
The first being the U.S. Patriot, an act that allows for a mass surveillance state, but this time under the guise of fighting terrorism, unlike those commies over there. A piece of legislation criticized for its ability to give your local 3-letter agency the right to hold non-citizens suspected of direct or indirect support of terrorist groups or actions imprisoned indefinitely, and operates through the collection of information on phones, texts, financial records, and web searches we all use in our day-to-day lives, allowing for real-time communication on it, a practice called wiretap. To further complicate the powers deferred upon American corporations are quite unorthodox compared to the rest of the world, as the terms of service, aka those tiny pieces of text that pray to God, doesn't contain the naming rights to your firstborn child. The document that contains upwards of 18,000 words to read in full. Documents that are so long in fact that there's estimates that say we would lose $360 billion in productivity if we were to read all of them. Well, they carry with them implicitly the possibility to make those who do not comply a criminal. In circumstances in which individuals exceed the authorized access that the owners give them. One notable example being United States v. Aaron Swartz, a case in which a MIT student and computer programmer attempted to download 4.8 million articles from MIT's journal store, a digital library of academic journals, books, and primary sources, an act that undoubtedly violated terms of service, resulting in the man facing the possibility of a 50-year prison sentence, more than a dozen felonies, and a fine of $1 million. A conviction that was not ensued by MIT themselves, but instead was acted upon by federal prosecutors, with the entire ordeal ending in the man game-ending himself in the wake of the court case, and making national news. Outside of the abilities of a corporation, some US federal agencies have the legal authority to go through your phone and laptop without providing a justification within 100 miles of the border, an area that covers about 2/3 of the US population. And beyond this, even though the internet is not generally filtered by state agents, our current levels of freedoms comes with its fair share of hazards, as information that is posted online is often used by local police who overstep their authority by detaining, intimidating, and confiscating records of their actions. An overstep that has been a chronic problem in our history. From protesting the right not to be shot, to occupying Wall Street over banker bailouts, the openness of the internet in some ways makes it easier for bad actors to target individuals. It also makes it harder to implement sweeping cybersecurity measures, exposing people to the risk of disinformation campaigns. Prime examples being the recent case of January 6th, an event where a combination of pro-Trump media figures, foreign agents, including Russia, and the big man himself claimed that the 2020 presidential election was fraudulent on the grounds of rampant voter fraud, a claim that till this day has not been substantiated with enough evidence to prove that the outcomes of the elections are illegitimate, all culminating in a riot at the Capitol building in Washington, D.C., in the hopes of changing the results of the election. An event that shows that freedom of information is not an unlimited good without its drawbacks. Instead, it is a privilege that we all must be cautious of. The reasons for these discrepancies in how we regulate the online activity seems to be quite clear. It is an artifact of the power that comes with being able to speak one only mind to what could be millions of people. A power that could be used for both good and evil, depending upon who wields the pen, resulting in most nations having different forms of regulations over our means of communication, with the stated goal to curb slander, threats of violence, scams, violations of contracts, and the spread of obscenities, especially for those who are young, all in an attempt to maintain a sense of normalcy that is disrupted by the complications of how disruptive the internet has been. Thanks for watching and have a good night.